Everybody, welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm Devin Dwyer at ABC News headquarters in Washington. It's great to have you with us on this Monday. A lot of breaking news to get to at this hour. Impeachment investigators have begun releasing transcripts of the depositions that they've conducted over the past few weeks with top Trump administration officials about the president's dealings in Ukraine. The documents are now the first chance for you, for the public, to read for themselves the testimony of so many of these officials. Today, we got two of these documents released by the committees investigating the president, and our investigative reporter, Catherine Faulders, is here. She's been pouring through the text of these depositions. Over at the White House, reporter Jordan Phelps is there to get the White House reaction. But I do want to start with you, Catherine. Today, we learned, got to read for ourselves, the testimony of Marie Yovanovitch. She's the former ambassador to Ukraine and also a top official at the State Department. What did we learn in here? Yeah,
so I'd say that pouring through all of these documents, a lot of this we had known publicly, but what it does is we get to see what they said for themselves. A little bit of it is redacted for confidentiality reasons, but we really got to read the whole entire script. And what we learned from Yovanovitch, for example, was really the extent to which Giuliani was, in her words, back-channeling with foreign policy for Ukraine through the State Department. And from McKinley, aide to Pompeo, really, he alleged that Rudy Giuliani was the one who led this campaign that led to Yovanovitch's ouster. So much of a focus still on Giuliani and that back channel that he used for foreign policy to Ukraine through the State Department, which both of them testified that they found inappropriate.
So the details in these transcripts painting a picture of a shadow foreign policy being conducted by officials outside the State Department, around officials that have been there for a long time. And I think I also read that Yovanovitch said that she had felt threatened by some of the conduct of these officials, threatened that something might happen to her if she didn't comply with the president's. Where do we go from here? Why are these transcripts coming out now?
Yeah, so I think the timing of the release of the transcript signals that the committees, the three committees that are doing this investigative work, are potentially wrapping up their depositions behind closed doors. They're releasing what they said. We don't think that they'll call too many more witnesses. You've seen that the White House isn't, I know Jordan will talk about this, but didn't comply with the 4 people who were supposed to appear today. So told us today that he will roll out these transcripts from these other officials who have testified behind closed doors. We're going to see 2 more tomorrow. Republicans, of course, are saying that Democrats are cherry-picking these transcripts and the timing of the release. They've been calling for these released for some time. Exactly. Right. They've been calling for the release, so now the committee is releasing them, and we get to see them for ourselves ahead of public hearings.
That's right. And the House of Representatives voted last week, Jordan Phelps, to move towards public impeachment hearings. We expect that to happen in short order. But Democrats have been trying to squeeze in a few more private depositions, which they say is important to ensure the integrity of the investigation. But today, the White House blocked those. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Devin, a little bit of a victory for the White House here, because as we've been talking about in previous days, the White House hasn't been able to hold back some career officials that work within the administration from going ahead, going up to Capitol Hill and complying with those subpoenas. But today, Devin, we expected to hear from 4 political appointees within the administration, but they complied with what has been the White House order for them not to go up. They're hiding behind this legal argument that, people are caught between 2 co-equal branches of government, that the White House doesn't want them to go. So they're waiting for this to play out before they get called up, Devin. Of course, Democrats could sue to bring this to court to get these people to come up to testify, but we know they're not willing to wait because that would be a lengthy process. So we expect this to continue to move forward. But this, of course, could be a sideshow. But a little victory for this White House in what has been just a pouring out of testimony on Capitol Hill in general against this administration, Devin.
And those 4 officials, we have their names on the screen. They're not household names, but they are key players in what happened in the White House with respect to funding for Ukraine, that funding that was held up after it was approved by Congress, and what happened to those transcripts of the president's phone call. There are some allegations that John Eisenberg, you see there, he's a lawyer, he was one of the ones who helped hide it on a secret server The allegation being that there could potentially have been some kind of cover-up. So Congress, of course, wants to hear from those. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff, a Democrat, says he's not going to waste any time waiting for these people to come up to Capitol Hill. Take a look.
This will be further evidence of an effort by the administration to obstruct the lawful and constitutional duties of Congress. We're not going to delay our work. That would merely allow these witnesses and the White House to succeed with their goal, which is to delay, deny, obstruct.
So, Catherine, how soon will we actually see public hearings? And you know, and then whatever happened to the man or woman that started all this, the whistleblower? Will we hear from that person?
Well, from sources that I've spoken to, I believe, and they believe, that the public hearings phase of this is likely going to start as early as next week. Of course, they have to notice those earlier, so we could be learning about those this week. And with regard to the whistleblower, I think it's important to note that this whistleblower, through their attorneys, has said that he or she is willing to answer questions from Republicans in written form, but probably wouldn't come up and testify before the committee. Republicans, of course, are saying that that's not enough, including the president, saying that they want the whistleblower to testify, to come up and testify publicly. Or
sort of ironic, isn't it? Because President Trump didn't want to sit down with Robert Mueller, but did respond in writing. He said that was sufficient.
Very ironic, and I think Republicans, they are making this story more about the whistleblower now. You've kind of seen a shift in strategy. They want him to come up. This person, they say, the person who started this from the beginning. But the reality is that all of these witnesses, most of them, behind closed doors, have corroborated the whistleblower's account. And Republicans don't necessarily now want to focus on the facts that are coming out of those depositions, but just about getting the whistleblower to come up and testify.
We're getting a clearer picture of all the evidence gathered so far in this probe ahead of public hearings. Catherine Faulders, thank you so much. Catherine's reporting and Jordan's reporting is online at abcnews.com. You can also read the transcripts for yourselves as these documents come out over the next few days at abcnews.com. Next, to a major development today in the fight over President Trump's tax returns. The president, as you know, is the first president in modern times not to release his returns to the public. But today, a unanimous federal appeals court said Trump's accounting firm has to supply the 8 years of returns requested by New York prosecutors in an investigation they are doing into possible financial crimes. Our senior investigative reporter, Aaron Katersky, is in New York. He's been on the story today, joins me on the phone. Aaron, take a step back for a second. Why are New York prosecutors looking for these returns? What are they trying to find?
Devin, these returns are being sought by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office as part of an investigation into hush payments made to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, two women who have alleged long denied affairs with President Trump before the campaign. And the question is whether those payments may have violated any state law related to falsifying business records. We know Michael Cohen went to prison over those hush payments for violating campaign finance law, but that's where the federal investigation ended. And now Manhattan prosecutors are looking into any state law violations.
And they say they need those tax returns to determine if there was any wrongdoing. Meanwhile, Jordan Phelps, the White House says the president, while in office, is immune from any criminal prosecution. But there's sort of a catch here, right? In the appeals court's decision today, they say this isn't actually about the president, but it's about his accounting firm.
Yeah, Devin, the White House and the president's personal lawyer is making this really sweeping argument here that the president is totally immune because they say of his rare constitutional responsibilities as the president from any sort of prosecution while he's in office. We heard from the president's personal lawyer, Jay Sekulow, there say the decision of the Second Circuit will be taken to the Supreme Court. The issue raised in this case goes to the heart of our republic. The constitutional issues are significant. So, Devin, this by no means the end of this legal argument. The president's legal team going to continue fighting here, taking this all the way to the Supreme Court, Devin.
And Aaron, looking ahead to the United States Supreme Court, what indications do you have about how this will be dealt with there? What will the justices look at when they get this case before them?
Well, look, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion they'll necessarily take cert and actually hear it. Now, of course, they'll be hard-pressed to because it comes directly from the White House and from President Trump's legal team. But there are some real interesting constitutional questions. First, the Federal Appeals Court wholeheartedly rejected the blanket immunity that President Trump was claiming from any step along the way of a criminal process. We know the Justice Department believes a sitting president cannot be indicted, but the Federal Appeals Court said, a subpoena for tax returns is a long way from an indictment, and it was a perfectly legitimate request. So we'll see if the Supreme Court agrees. And there really is no precedent here. Clinton versus Paula Jones was a civil matter. Richard Nixon even was forced to turn over White House tapes, as you know, Devin. So there is some precedent for a president being forced to comply with subpoenas. But how much immunity a sitting president might have and from what parts of criminal procedure, that may be new ground for the Supreme Court if they decide to take up the case.
If it makes it there, but a significant development nonetheless. This Federal Appeals Court unanimously ruling that the president does have to turn over 8 years of returns. Aaron Katersky, our senior investigative reporter, thank you so much. Jordan Phelps, thank you from the White House. Next to the race for 2020, and a new ABC News Washington Post poll showing the field down to 3 at the top at least. Take a look at the new numbers of frontrunners. Joe Biden there at 28%, Elizabeth Warren 23%, Sanders 17%, and here it is, Pete Buttigieg rising, having a bit of a moment at 9%. A new solidification here in the three-way race as we head into November, 1 year out from Election Day. Johnny Verhoeven is here. Johnny, these numbers are significant because that's a new high for Elizabeth Warren in an ABC poll.
Right, and like you said, it's a solidification of a trend that we've seen all the way going back to July. She's risen steadily, especially in our polling. She went from 11% in July to 17%. Now she's really right there within striking distance of Joe Biden. And that's something that, like I said, we've been seeing this all throughout the summer, and Warren has really been aggressive in the early states as well. You've seen her rise in Iowa, too.
And there's been a lot of talk lately about Joe Biden sort of lagging, falling behind, both in fundraising and in some of the polling in the early states. But what does seem to keep him afloat in our survey is his numbers on electability. Take a look at this. ABC News asked voters who has the best chance to beat Trump. These are Democratic voters. And look at, by a wide margin, Joe Biden.
Right, and you've seen that's something that's sort of buoyed his candidacy all throughout the entirety of it, and you've seen his campaign all day today. Staffers have been tweeting it out and telling us, look, we are looking at these polls. This is the best evidence as to why you should still pick Joe Biden. Now, we should also note, though, that number, that electability number, who can best beat Trump, has also been declining for Biden, and you've seen Warren gain a little bit, so that is potentially something to keep an eye on.
Some change there, perhaps, in this head versus heart debate we've seen inside the Democratic Party, practically thinking maybe Biden, but they love Elizabeth Warren. Take a look at this when we ask Democratic voters who best understands your problems. It's actually Bernie Sanders topping that list, 30% there. Does this surprise you?
Well, that's something I think you've also seen at the core of Bernie Sanders' campaign. Like, that's his main pitch to voters. What's interesting to see there is that competition between him and Warren. You've seen that spill out in a number of different ways. You see it now with the battle over Medicare for All. You see Bernie saying, look, my plan is actually more progressive. This is just sort of another way that Bernie and Warren have really kind of been circling each other as who best connects to the working class, who best actually sort of sells that authenticity to those voters.
And finally, I just wanted to point out to our viewers a number that struck me as significant here on this question of qualities in the candidates. We talked about electability, who best understands my issues. This one, who is the most honest and trustworthy in the Democratic field right now? Look at this. Biden and Sanders neck and neck there, but Elizabeth Warren notably down in comparative in the broader field as well, one of the lower percentages. Is that what do you take from that?
And that's something that especially has come into focus in the last week since she released her plan to pay for Medicare for All. I think a lot of her Democratic rivals, including Bernie Sanders and including Joe Biden and a lot of other people in the Democratic field, have pointed and say, look, Elizabeth Warren's just not being honest to you about the numbers. And I think you see that reflected now in the polls, that people are still hesitant to say, Elizabeth Warren has all these plans, but is she really being honest about the numbers to back it up?
Johnny, thank you so much. Let's go out to Iowa now. We have full team coverage out on the ground after a whirlwind weekend out there. Cheyenne Hazlitt, who covers the Warren campaign. Justin Gomez is there on the Buttigieg bus trip. And our Zoreen Shah is in Los Angeles, where, of course, the Kamala Harris campaign is anchored. I want to start with you, Cheyenne, because as we just heard Johnny say there, Elizabeth Warren under a bit of pressure now since she has both come out as a frontrunner and released details of her Medicare for All plan. She's on the defensive big time.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. We've seen a new phase of the campaign kick off basically since that LJ dinner, also the same day she finally announced the plan to fund Medicare for All. And it really is a Warren on the defensive. 5 times in the last 4 days, we've heard her deliver this sort of altered stump speech where she talks about how she is the one who will fight for voters and other Democrats aren't. She's calling out in bolder ways than before other Democrats who will just not fight for these big ideas that she's putting forward. And it is an attempt to get out in front of some of this criticism that we've seen lobbed at her most often, that she has so many plans, that the ways to fund it require lots of funds, and that people just don't simply believe that she can get all of that done. That being said, it's not just other Democrats who are saying this. It's voters. It's voters in New Hampshire, voters here in Iowa. Almost every event, she does get asked, how will you work across the aisle with Republicans if you're elected? And also, how will you win over Republicans to get elected? That being said, what we hear from the voters who
does she convince them, Cheyenne? Because we've seen you documenting a lot of these people who they come out at these town halls. They say, "We love you, Elizabeth Warren, but gosh, I just doubt that you can get this done." When she answers that, how do those people respond?
Yeah, it's a huge question circling her campaign. The voters that support her say, we like the big ideas. We're here for the big ideas. I asked one voter about whether or not she actually thinks Medicare for All can come to fruition in the way that Warren has laid it out. This voter was in Des Moines for the LJ dinner and then in Davenport volunteering for Warren's campaign. And she said, maybe it's not going to happen the way Warren laid it out. And then she quoted Warren and she said, but dream big. And then another voter had actually printed out that plan and circled a line in it, and that line was, you don't get what you don't fight for. So I think the idea here is that they like the ideas that she's laying out, and they're okay with the fact that compromise might be a part of that.
And a lot of voters still trying to make up their minds. A lot of them, at least in our poll as well, still open to changing their minds as we head into caucus season. Cheyenne Haslett, thank you so much. Let's go over to Justin Gomez now, who's been on the Mayor Pete Buttigieg bus tour through Iowa. Justin, boy, he's having quite a moment now. You're in Spencer, Iowa, and 7% nationally in our poll. But take a look at how the mayor is doing in Iowa. He's tied for second.
Yeah, and the mayor is really building off that momentum, Devin. At the LJ dinner on Friday night, he really tried to deliver a message of the post-Trump presidency, and that's kind of the message that he's delivering out here on the trail throughout the town halls that he's held this weekend and the rallies. That's really the message that he wants voters to understand. What is the country going to look like after Trump, and how Mayor Buttigieg can actually take it forward? That's what he wants them to understand. And when I was in the crowd talking to voters this weekend, they were telling me that they're still trying to wind down their choices, but when they see Mayor Pete up on the stage, they see somebody youthful. They see him as intelligent and just somebody different than the other candidates in the field. Here's a little bit of what some of them were telling me.
I'm not really sure what it is about him. I just feel like he seems like he'd be very approachable, very open-minded. He seems to appeal to a wide range of people. And I think we just need somebody who's a little more reasonable right now.
He's extremely smart. He's a Rhodes Scholar. He speaks 6 languages. He handles himself so well. I just think he's a breath of fresh air.
He stands out from some of the other Democrats. What we get here in Iowa, we stick to our values, and some of the Democrats are proposing some things that are daunting to some Iowans. But I don't believe Pete. I believe he's more center. I believe he's lovable. You can listen to him, and he's a better candidate.
And 2 other things to note from that, other voters were also saying that they are also considering Elizabeth Warren, the ones here that are still kind of candidate shopping, but they're a little skeptical about Medicare for All, which is why they're looking towards Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who has a Medicare for All Who Want It plan, which keeps private insurance in place. And they're also just wanting, at the end of the day, any Democrat who can defeat Donald Trump in a general election.
Justin Gomez in Spencer, Iowa for us. Justin, thank you so much for your great reporting. Johnny, it's just fascinating to hear from voters firsthand this dilemma that so many in Iowa are facing right now, which is they like a lot of the platforms of some of these candidates, but they doubt that they can execute. Exactly,
and you see that sort of that hesitancy that it reflected in our poll. You have over half of voters, Democrats that we polled, over 50% of them say they would consider another candidate, and 65% of Elizabeth Warren's supporters say they would consider another candidate.
Let's talk a little bit about where the rest of the field is. We know Mayor Pete, Marianne Williamson, John Delaney, who were in the sub-single digits in our poll. They're still fighting. They made it on the ballot in New Hampshire today. They officially will be in the New Hampshire primary. But then there are the stragglers like Kamala Harris. She has really slid, and in our poll now, she went all the way down to, I think, 4%.
Yeah, lost 5% in the recent poll, and you've seen her, almost entirely refocus her entire campaign. Zohreen Shah obviously has a lot of reporting on that, but you've really seen a shift in recent days in her strategy. And let's go out to Los Angeles to get a check-in on Kamala Harris's campaign. Zohreen Shah, man, this is a big swing for her. She came out of the gate in double digits, soaring. How do you take and read this this pretty epic plunge?
Yeah, plunge is the best way to say it, Devin. One of the more surprising things about this poll is her numbers. Back in July, she was at 11%, and now she is at 2%. That is a dramatic drop for the California senator. Now, people I've spoke to in the field, they say they don't think she has a clear message. She frequently talks about Donald Trump, but they say they know all the candidates don't like him. They want to hear more about what she will do for them. Some also say they don't like that she attacked Joe Biden in that first debate, especially when it became clear that they actually have a similar position on busing today. Now, other people say they had concerns that she could not defend her record against Tulsi Gabbard at that second debate. One person even told me she can dish it, but she can't take it. Now, the last week, her team has completely shifted focus to Iowa. Initially, they were depending on this state right here, California, her home state, to carry her through. But her team realized that they have to put a lot more effort into that first state. It really does generate momentum. They are doubling resources there. Now they're even sending staff from other states there. They are slashing their team in their Baltimore headquarters to pay for some of those expensive ad buys in Iowa. They're closing down 3 out of 4 offices in New Hampshire to make all of this possible. She also canceled her trip to New Hampshire there this week. We caught up with her about that just a couple days ago. Take a listen.
I am committed to New Hampshire, but we had to make difficult decisions. And so, yes, I'm all in Iowa because Iowa's the first state.
Okay, so you guys were asking me about the morale on her campaign. Most people don't even want to talk to reporters right now. They want this story to turn around, but that is going to take a lot of work. Her team is currently financially in the red. She is spending the first part of this week fundraising. Then it's over to Nevada for more campaigning, and of course, Iowa. Devin?
All right, she's in it through Iowa. Zohreen Shah in Los Angeles for us. Thank you so much. And Johnny Verhoeven, our political reporter. Thanks, Johnny. It's sweater season. It is. Here in the newsroom. It's a chilly day here in the nation's capital. Next to the growing national security concerns about the popular social media app TikTok, used by millions of American teenagers and young adults. This is, of course, the short video clip sharing service used by a lot of Americans, but it is the fact that it is Chinese-owned that is causing big concern, particularly here on Capitol Hill, where officials are raising concerns about censorship and data collection, possible national security implications. And for more on this now, I'm joined by Louise Matsakis with Wired, who covers security issues out there. Louise, thanks for coming in. Break down for us what the big security concerns are here. Do you think there's much to it?
So it's kind of in 2 camps. The first camp is the censorship concerns, right? Like, is TikTok's parent company, this Chinese startup called ByteDance, are they censoring stuff like the Hong Kong protests? The second concern is kind of this user data thing. Is information about U.S. users flowing to ByteDance and then to the Chinese Communist Party? That's kind of the 2 concerns that lawmakers have here. And whether they'll actually pan out, we'll have to see.
And what's the company saying about it?
So TikTok says that they don't store any data on U.S. users in China. They actually store it all in the U.S., and then it's backed up in Singapore. They say that their content moderation team is here in California in the U.S., and that they don't, allow the Chinese government to influence them. And for now, it's kind of this weird investigation in Congress. It's not, just a straight national security investigation, they're actually looking at how TikTok acquired this other popular social media app called Musical.ly, which they then shut down and rebranded as TikTok 2 years ago. So the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States is looking at that acquisition and whether that was proper, basically.
So as a techie read in on this, Louise, where do you come out right now? Do you use TikTok? Do you recommend parents should let their kids use TikTok?
I use TikTok, yeah, especially for my own reporting. And I think that right now we don't have any, solid evidence showing that there are any national security concerns here. I think that there are some more basic things that parents can be concerned about. Who are they talking to on this app? Who are they communicating with? Earlier this year, TikTok was fined by the Federal Trade Commission for collecting information on users illegally who were minors under the age of 13. So I think that's more of kind of a ready, more current concern right now. This national security and China risk, I think, is kind of more a reflection of the ongoing trade war.
And concerns over Huawei, the other tech giant, and of course their cell phones and cellular data networks that are under fire as well. Fascinating story. Louise Matsakis at Wired, thank you so much. We'll continue to follow your reporting, Louise. Finally today, the World Series champions today paid a visit to the White House here in their hometown. There it is on the south lawn of the White House. The president had some warm things to say about his Nats.
America fell in love with the Nats baseball. They just fell in love with Nats baseball. That's all they wanted to talk about. That and impeachment. I like Nats baseball much more.
And the president there making a reference to impeachment, saying he loves the Nats more. But take a look at this moment that went viral online. It was when Nats catcher Kurt Suzuki took the lectern there, put on a Make America Great Again hat. And look at that hug from Donald Trump. It was a full embrace from behind of the president. A little bit awkward there. But nonetheless, the president showing some love. Also received a jersey from Nats first baseman Ryan Zimmerman as well, which he will now no doubt display in the Oval Office. Almost all the players were there today from the team except pitcher Sean Doolittle. He said he couldn't do it because of the president's rhetoric. You'll remember the president was at Game 5 of the World Series in Washington, where he was cheered and loudly booed in the stadium there. But the president keeping a smile on things, and today, very gracious host to the Washington Nationals. Hats off again to those World Series champions here in Washington. Thanks to you for watching us here in the briefing room on this Monday. We're here every day, 3:30 Eastern Time, 5:30 and 6:30 as well. Download the ABC News app to follow us 24/7. You can watch us live, commercial-free, right there on the app as well. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Hope to see you right back here tomorrow.